Hello, this is Thomas O. Mills. I had the opportunity to run the Hopi Culture Center up at Second Mesa 42 years ago, and I was questioned daily about their ceremonial cycles and their creation story, and I had to study and try to answer those questions. I was the only one up there, and many people asked me a lot of questions, so I did the best I could, and I learned everything I could, and now I think it's kind of all come together, and I'd like to share what I found. And maybe if it's for everybody's judgment, they can look at it and determine what they think's right. I think it explains why there's pyramids, who built the pyramids, what Stonehenge means, why there's a Great Wall of China, all these unexplained buildings with these huge stones. And I think if you just take a look at this creation story of the Hopis, it might answer some questions for you. How it relates to global warming and how our seasons have changed and all these strange events we're having with our weather and how it all relates to the murals of Egypt and what they really say. So I'd like to put it out there for everybody to take a look at, and then everyone can make their own judgment. Thanks. In 1963, Frank Waters collaborated with White Bear Fredericks, and they wrote the Book of the Hopi. They interviewed over 30 Hopi elders. Many of them were over 100 years old. And one of the main things the elders wanted them to know was their creation story, where we came from, where we're headed. Back then, there was no televisions or telephones on the reservation. Everyone took part in the ceremonies, and it was a great way of life for them. They've lived to be 104 years old, eating what they grew and praying for rain and praying for the rest of humanity. So it was a one-time event. I don't think you could do it again today. There's not that many elders up there left, and most of them have been through our school system, and it's not the same. Okay, so let's talk about the Hopi creation story. This is from the Book of the Hopi, and it's my short version of it. You need to get the Book of the Hopi and read it yourself if you want to get the whole version of it. But it begins by saying that the Creator was traveling through space. He wasn't alone. He had his nephew with him. And this tells me that the Creator had to have parents and a sister, and she had to have a husband. There was also a female companion called Spider Woman, and later on in the story it talks about guardians and ant people. So they were traveling through space and they came upon Earth, but there was a problem. It was wobbling in space. The Earth was out of balance. The Creator told Spider Woman to correct the problem, and after she did, two twins formed on each pole. The twin on the North Pole was for balance, and the one on the South Pole was for vibration. So what's on each pole that is a twin that can come and go at different periods of time? I think it's ice, our polar ice caps. So whatever Spider Woman did to stabilize the planet should still be here today. There should be evidence of her work. If not, the planet would start wobbling and go out of balance. So why are all these largest pyramids located north of the equator between the 15th and 30th latitude in China, Mexico, and Egypt? Has anybody ever combined all the weight of all the pyramids together? How many pyramids are there? After the earth was stabilized, Spider Woman created trees, bushes, plants, flowers, all kinds of seed-bearing and nut-bearing to clothe the earth, and gave names to each one of them. Then she created the birds and animals and distributed them around the four corners of the earth. This might explain how we had buffalo in America and cows in Europe and rice in China, wheat in the Middle East. After the Creator saw how perfect everything was, he was ready to place his finest creation on the planet, humans. He told his nephew and Spider Woman that they were to remain here on Earth and start his new civilizations, but first they needed a plan. He told his nephew that he would try 9 times, once for himself, once for the nephew and 7 times for the worlds to come, because he knew the earth still had a problem. It was reoccurring. He then instructed his nephew to put his plan on earth for all of us to see, so it should still be here. If the nephew and Spider-Woman to remain here on earth, their homes and tombs should still be here also. This might explain why there's evidence of such advanced technology in our ancient past. If they could travel through space to get here, they were advanced when this all started. The Creator told Spider-Woman to create mankind, but her first attempt could not speak. It had trouble reproducing, and it ran with the animals. So in my mind, these were the Neanderthals, a test to see if mankind could survive here on Earth. This is the same thing we did when we went to outer space for the first time. We sent a monkey and a dog to see if it could survive there before we risk a human. A new study of the DNA of Neanderthals concluded that they did not contribute genetic material to modern humans. I do not believe we evolved from monkeys or crawled out of the sea. I believe the Hopi creation story, and I think it can be proven. On her next attempt, she created 4 races of mankind: black, yellow, red, and white, all at one location, all at the same time, and all equal. She gave each the ability to think, speak, a different language to each, and the ability to reason and to multiply. Each group was set to different areas in which to live, and later on in the story we learn that each group had 1 or more guardians that taught them language, customs, religion, and beliefs. So this might explain how the black man developed in Africa, the yellow man in Asia, the white man in Europe, and the red man in the Americas. This might also explain, for one example, is how the yellow man had Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Koreans, and why the first guardian of China had to build a great wall to separate the yellow man from the rest of the continent. He wanted time for the yellow man to establish himself. The Great Wall is over 5,000 miles long, or a distance greater than from Seattle, Washington to Miami, Florida. This guardian was also credited with establishing language, mathematics, culture, and is thought to be buried in a large pyramid complex in China. But there could have been more than one guardian. Like I said, they could have taught him Chinese, Japanese, and the other races could have each had more than one guardian that went with them to begin with. So before the 4 races left, the Creator laid out 4 ears of corn, 1 for each race. The Hopis waited until last and received the smallest ear. It grew close to the ground, didn't need much water to survive. Corn doesn't grow in the wild, but it feeds birds and fish and humans and insects. It's the perfect food, and it feeds all living things. Ancient humans did not develop corn from a hybrid seed, and we should not be changing the genetic code. The Creator made corn perfect for us in the beginning. So these first people multiplied, spread across the land, and were very happy. Everything they needed was provided by their Mother Earth. The Hopi say that all you need is your plant and stick, your seeds, and your water jar. Over time, some people forgot to sing praises to the Creator, and then a mockingbird appeared who talked and talked until he convinced the people they were different from each other. People and animals drew away from each other and forgot the Creator's plan. Some people in each group still lived by his plan, but were called to a large ant hill where the ant people lived. They allowed the chosen people to come inside while the first world was destroyed by fire. Everything was consumed by fire. The volcanoes opened up, the forest burned. Nothing was left except the people safe inside the womb of the anthill. Everyone else perished. So what structure resembles an anthill? It's located around the planet and has survived the destruction of the first world. They should still be standing today. I think it's the pyramids. Today it's not getting cool enough in the winter months to kill the beetles that infest our forest. Whole forests are dying and becoming fuel for fire. Rain and snow patterns have changed because of global warming. Trees are dropping their seeds at the wrong time. The cycles of the earth and the cycles of the trees don't match up anymore on account of this change in climate. But the people inside, the people that were safe inside the anthill, they shared food with the ants. And these ant people brought lights into the chambers with large crystals that they laid out in the sun, just like our solar lights of today. And this might be the answer as to how the ancient ones painted inside the dark chambers without leaving soot on the roofs from the fires of the candles. Then one day the Creator appeared. He told these people that the second world string or thread was running out. And he wanted them to go into the anthills one more time when he destroyed the second world. When everyone was safe inside the anthill, he commanded the twins to leave their post on the north and south poles, where they were stationed to keep the earth rotating properly. When they did, then the earth teetered off balance. It spun around crazily and rolled over twice. Mountains plunged into the seas with a great splash, and the seas and lakes sloshed all over the land as the world spun through cold and lifeless space, and then it froze into solid ice. So what's a thread or string of time that this crater is talking about? Are these events predictable? Did a polar shift cause all the volcanoes to open at the end of the first world? Are polar ice caps leaving their post as we speak? The chosen people were safe and warm in their anthills, sharing food once again. Then the twins slowly returned to their stations on the north and south pole, and the earth began to rotate properly. The Creator again stomped on the anthill and told the ant people to open up and let the chosen people climb up the ladder and emerge into the third world. In this new world, the people multiplied in such numbers and advanced so rapidly that they created big cities, countries, whole civilizations. Very few remembered to sing praises to the Creator or live by his ways, and more people became wholly occupied with their new earthly plans. They used their creative powers in evil and destructive ways, even sending flying machines to other cities, attacked them, and then returned so fast that no one knew where they came from or where they went, just like we do at the present time with our drones. So corruption and war entered into the third world, as it had the other two. This time the Creator didn't wait for the thread or string to run out. This tells me that the first and second worlds were on time and that the third time was early. He was afraid that the people with the songs in their heart would be killed off before he could save them. This time, instead of going to the large anthills, he had Spider-Woman seal them up in hollow tubes with food and water. Again, the twins left their posts and the world flooded. The chosen floated many days and built rafts and traveled east towards the rising sun. Finally, after a long period of time, they landed on the western side of this continent, the fourth world. Here they met their guardian, who directed them up to their present location in northern Arizona, where they remain to this day. So, if I were going to make a movie about this story, the cast of characters would be the Creator, the nephew, Spider-Woman, the twins, Neanderthals, a mockingbird, lots of people, and some way of indicating what world we're currently in. So basically that's the Hopi creation story in a short form. I went through it pretty quick for you there, but I was trying to get it all in. And, basically it says that all four races of man, the black, yellow, red, and white, were created equal and at the same time. It was at one certain place. And that the earth is in a delicate balance. It's in our human hands. And that the Creator has been here 3 times prior to this world we're living in today. So this mural here pretty much describes all that in the simplest form. It shows a life symbol holding the earth with our 2 hands, human hands, and you can see that it's the 3 times he's been here previously. So I also mentioned that the Creator, if you were going to put this in a movie, like in a cast of characters, this next mural shows that. He uses a hawk sitting on a perch to show that we're on a delicate balance. And there's a prayer feather off to the right-hand side. And you see that only one leg of the perch goes down to the ground. And the 3 dirt areas are the 3 previous worlds. And in those 3 previous worlds, you see the mockingbird at the base with the plants and animals that the Spider-Woman brought. Then the 2 twins, then the Neanderthals. And everybody's trying to help with the wobble, with the balance. They're all got their arms up. And we're in this present world of today, the 4th world. We've got our hands up too. We're trying to help with the balance. But the new initiate, the 5th world to come, is creeping up slowly. Up above you see the earth, and then you see the creator looking down, but the buzzards are pulling on the earth. So that's the way I read that mural. It's just the Hopi creation story. So we have to figure out why he used that hawk to represent the fourth world. And I call this mural the universal language. It shows the creator at a certain angle. I think that angle has something to do with the angle of the earth. But it shows him erect. He's ready to create, and he's got his foot down, and he has a hold of a snake. And the snake has a wobble. It's just like the earth's wobble. And it shows it's wobbled 4 times in the past, and each one of them has a certain figure in it. Well, he's at this certain angle. He's put his arm down, and he's straightened out our path. And I think he did that with the pyramids. And those are they call them the 4 sons of Horus, but I believe that they represent the first, second, third, and fourth world. And you can see that the hawk is the fourth world, and you also see the jackal would be the third world. So whenever you see those 2 figures, you know one represents the third, and then one. So to me, that's a very important mural. It tells me how he communicates. When he's erect, that means he will create. When he's not erect, that means he won't create. So it also lets us know what these other murals, what they're about. So if you look at this one, you see the jackal, or the third world, showing people about balanced. The nephew is there with him, and he's teaching the young students about balance. And you see the creator and Spider-Woman off to the left watching him. They've got the prayer feather and the earth on one side of the balance, and the destroyer is standing there at the right watching who's been trained. Up above you see the students that have already been trained. You see the twins, the guardians, and then there's the hawk, the fourth world. So it's going from the third world up to the fourth world. So what I think it means is that in the beginning, the Creator taught us that the earth was in a delicate balance, just the way the Hopis have taught us. And though it's so delicate, it's the weight of a feather. And that's what I think that means. So if we know where the Hopis are living now, and we know they traveled north after they landed on the west side of this continent, to trace their footsteps back, we'd have to go south. And the oldest community down south on the west side of the continent is called Montverde, and it was occupied 12,500 years ago after the last ice age. That's where I believe they landed when they came across the Pacific Ocean. Down there, the crater is marked on the land. You can see that first little picture there. That's a road with a car on it. These huge murals are carved into the desert down there in Chile. One of them shows a kachina, another the ladder going up, and a man divided on top. And the Hopis believe that you have the right path or the wrong path. Many of their murals and hieroglyphs have that same path on them. So you also see that there's a spider there, and also the Bear Clan signature, that box with the human figure in it. So I believe this is where they landed after the Great Flood, after the ice caps melted the last time 12,500 years ago. So if you want to trace their footsteps further back, you have to go across the ocean, past Easter Island and Tonga, and lead you over to Egypt and the pyramids. And remember, we were talking about that the Creator left his plan here on Earth. Well, I believe that plan is outlined here in the pyramid complex there on the Plaza at Giza. You see the large pyramids, the satellite pyramids, and the temples in front of them. I believe those all relate to the Hopi creation story, and I'll try to explain it for you. You remember that the Creator said he wanted one for himself. That would be the largest pyramid. Then one for his nephew. That would be the pyramid that's centered in the center of the world's land masses. And then one for the trip that they first made over here, and that would be the smaller pyramid. And then you've got the 6 for the worlds to come. So 3 of those worlds are already in the past, and 3 of them are in the present up in front of the Creator's pyramid. So he's got 3 to create and 3 that are already past, and we're living here in the 4th world. So this whole pyramid complex is lined up with the winter solstice, the summer solstice, and the equinox. And the Hopis have their creation cycle, which is also based on those same events, the winter, summer, and equinox. So if you put the 2 together, I'll show you a mural here of their ceremonial cycle. It's right out of the book of the Hopi, and it's backwards. It shows the seasons going the opposite direction the way the earth turns. But if you overlaid that on top of the pyramid complex, this is what you get. So you see that there's non-Kachina ceremonies and then Kachina ceremonies, and the Kachinas are spirit beings, or the guardians that come to help them. And you see they go into initiation there in November, and then they come out December 21st is when the Kachinas arrive, and they stay with the Hopis until the summer solstice at the end of the home dance there in July. And that's the ceremonial cycle we need to be looking at when we're looking at this pyramid complex and Stonehenge and these other sites around the world. If you overlay it over the pyramid complex, you see that the Creator's pyramid, he has 3 small pyramids in front of it, and a little eagle figure there. He told the Hopis they could use that to communicate with him. And that's a temple there, the remains of a temple. And then the 3 small satellite pyramids. And if you go through the cycles, you see that the first world, the second world, the third world, the 4th world, or time, is divided up into equal parts around this circle. And then you have where our life is right now, this 4th world. You see that it's between the 4th and the 5th. So we're heading into the 5th cycle. So the way I see it, it's exactly like the Hopi creation story. 3 worlds in our past and 3 worlds that are going to be created. In front of the nephew's pyramid, there's a series of temples. And we'll get into each one of these individually because I believe they show us where the Hall of Records would be, which I think is Spider Woman's tomb. You know, we've found the nephew's tomb, and we've never found a female's tomb over there yet. But in front of the Creator's pyramid, like I said, there's a temple that looks like an eagle's feather, lines up with the winter solstice. Then in front of the nephew's temple, you have this mortuary temple, they call it, a real bad name, but to me it looks like Spider Woman. You can see her head and her eyes, and she has 4 feathers in her headdress and a navel area. And then in front of the pyramid, I think, is the pyramid where we're lined up today. You have 2 pyramids that are lined up right with the equinox, which I think represents the balance. And then you have the Valley Temple, which is a male figure that can only count to 3, and he shows the rotation of the earth. And then you have the Sphinx Temple. And the Sphinx Temple, he has a Sphinx right above it, but that's the newborn, the embryo. You can see his little eyes and his navel. So there's a navel in the female figure and a navel in the baby figure. And I think it represents the life, the death, and then the rebirth. If there's an underground chamber, I think it would be between the navel of the female figure, going underground, right underneath the Sphinx and over to the Sphinx Temple. And that's where the Hopis emerged, right there in that temple, and went out through his ears there and came out to this world going east. Well, I mentioned that I thought the nephew had already been found, and I think that's Tutankhamun. That's why he was buried in 4 gold coffins, and he's located up in the Valley of the Kings. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But let's look at one of these murals that they really don't have much a clue what it stands for. They call it the astronomical ceiling. And when I see it, I see the Hopi balance. We're talking about 6 on one side and 6 on the other. And you can see there's only 4 over on the one side right now of our circle. And that's the circle around the pyramid complex. And you see that there's an Orion figure, or a hawk, and he's spearing a bull. And down at the bottom you see the nephew on one side of the balance and the destroyer on the other. The destroyer has his hand on a switch, and I think it has to do with Orion, the constellation of Orion, coming in contact with the constellation of the Bull. And this is represented over and over again in murals in Egypt. And they always show that point in time where the destroyer, he might have a feather and he's toppling the bull over, and Orion is spearing the bull. There might be 3 stars above the bull, 1 right in front of it, and then 3 under it. This is represented over and over and over, and I think the Creator was trying to get this message to us. And I think the Creator knew about the precession of the equinox, and he knew that our location, and he could plot it backwards and forwards where Earth was going to be, and he could tell, you know, the stars don't move, but the Earth moves, and we move 1 degree every 72 years. So it takes, if there's 360 degrees in a circle, then it would take 25,920 years to go through a cycle of the 360 degrees. And I'll show you that later on here, how Orion is moving on one path and the bull and the constellations are moving on the other. So here's another mural that covers the whole top of a ceiling, and it's 2 sides, and you can see that the nephew is balancing the bull on a balance, then the destroyer is behind it with a rope ready to pull it, and Orion's bending underneath trying to support the bull. On the other side of the mural, in the opposite direction, you see the nephew leading Spider Woman, and he's got 3 more Orions to come. So to me, it's just symbolic of what the Hopi creation story said, that this is the 4th time, and he'll be leading us into another world here pretty soon if we don't get our act together and figure this out. And that's what this is all about. Notice that Spider Woman, she's got her hand on her prayer feather and some tablets, and then she's got the life symbol and a lily, and I guess the lily represents rebirth. And the nephew, all he has is this planting stick and the life symbol. So they're traveling, getting ready to travel into this new world. And so here's another mural that shows the same thing. You got the nephew, and he's got his hands up as if to say, you know, stop, please don't do this. And you have the destroyer with his hand on the switch. The nephew's offering him blessings, and the bull is hidden up in the stars. And you see 3 previous graves. So the Creator's tried to tell. I said the Creator knew about the procession, and I think that he carved the first series of the constellations in the ceiling of Dendra there at Egypt. When the pyramid was half built, they used it as a platform. In the Grand Gallery, they could use it just like we do our observatories. And he charted the 12 constellations through the night sky, and he carved them into the ceiling of Dendra. Now Napoleon blasted it out of took it to the Louvre over in France. But if you look at it, you see it's supported by 4 Spider Womans and the 8 and Orion. You know, so there's 12 figures with 24 hands, just like the wheel we were looking at the beginning. So how do we prove that the Earth pole has ever been in different locations, that the Earth has ever shifted like the Hopi creation story says? Well, if you look at Karnak, you see that the temple has actually been moved 4 times, so it could line up with the winter solstice. Just today it's lined up, but if you look, there's 4 previous doorways. All these magnificent temples and have all been moved to correspond to where it is today. You can plot where it used to be. Now, when you look up at the night sky, this is from Hancock's Message of the Sphinx, you see that if you look right from the Sphinx head, that's probably where it started, where we get our starting point. And you can see that the constellations are on the elliptic path, and that's straight east. But if you look to the south of the pyramid, that's where Orion is. And he's been going up over the years as we travel through space, through this procession. The whole system, we're getting closer to this point where Orion will meet the bull. And I think that's what this is all about. Where the Creator, if he traveled through space, he could very well plot and chart where Earth was going to be in the near future, and there's a point in time where the Earth is heating up and our poles are going to melt. And it's not just man-made pollution, it's our location in space. So he wants us to figure this out. That's what I see in all these murals. Now, if Tutankhamun was buried up in the Valley of the Kings, right next to that is a place called KV5, and I think it represents, Orion and the nephew. You see, he's got 6 on one side and 1 on the other, and the place where his head should be, there's no Orion figure, and his arms and legs and feet. The feet have leggings on them just like a Kachina would wear. And if you look at the whole Valley of the Kings with this Hopi creation story in mind, you see that it's actually charted out to be the constellations, just like in the ceiling of Dendra. You've got Taurus, the bull, you got the twins, but Orion isn't where he should be. The KV5 is up there, and that's where they found the nephew. So what could we do to figure out how this period of time was and if it corresponds to the Hopi creation story? Well, Hapgood wrote a book, Charles Hapgood wrote a book called Path of the Poles, and in it he went through 100,000 years of climate change, him and his students, and they came up with this chart. And you see that 12,500 years ago there was a pole shift, right when the poles melted. There was 25,000 years ago there was a pole shift with the Ice Age, and then at 50,000 there was a pole shift back with the fire. So how's this correspond with the Earth's temperature? And then again there was a pole shift there at 75,000 and at 100,000. So this is a reoccurring cycle around every 25,920 years. Except the one came early, just like the Hopi said, 12,500 years ago, half the distance. So if we look at a chart of 400,000 years of temperature and CO2 in our atmosphere, you can see where we'd only have to start with 100,000 years, and this big changes we're having right now, we're right at the peak. And you can see those peaks have happened before, and it always drops right down into an ice age or a cooling off period. So when you look at these, he also figured out where the pole would have been, and he gives us 4 locations where this pole, the previous poles, might have been located. And so if we know where these pole locations used to, or where they were located previously, and we had a tool, we could plot the tool over these ancient monuments and see if they lined up with previous poles. So my thought would be is to use the Hopi ceremonial cycles where we worry about where the equinox is, the winter solstice, and the summer solstice. Those 2 solstices give us the location of where east was. So I came up with a simple tool, just plotting those 3 things. You've got the equinox, the winter, summer solstice, north, south, east, and west. And if you put a circle around them and divide it into your 25,920 years, you get your 12 cycles, years of 2160. And if you overlay that over something like Stonehenge, you see that you know where east was because it only fits on that circle in one direction. Those middle stones act just like gun sights. I mean, they line up to stars. And east isn't where it was supposed to be. But if you line that where it is right now up to the pole locations by Hapgood, you see that north was right at the North Pole back at that time period. So it gives you the date of Stonehenge. So if you go to the Avenue of the Dead, it's the same thing. It lines up where the North Pole was according to Hapgood. And like the Hopi said, east hasn't always been east. I think the stela is where the was measured, just like in front of the pyramid complex in Giza. It was that way at Stonehenge also, and where those lines cross, that's where they're finding the buried chambers right now. And it all comes together. Also, when you look at the Avenue of Dead, you find a picture of Orion. and his belt would point to the largest pyramid in the world down there, and I believe it's all connected. There's theories that the pyramid complex in Giza is lined up to Orion's belt, and the Hopi mesas are lined up to Orion's belt, and the constellation of Orion. And here he is down at the Avenue of the Dead, and even over at the Chinese periods. And I think each one of them represents the constellations that we were in during the previous worlds. If Orion is his belt is first, second, third mesa, then over at Chaco Canyon would be Sirius. And I think down here in Mexico, if you looked at this Orion and followed his belt, it leads right over to the largest pyramid in the world. And I think the other constellations are around him, those other temples over there. So here's some more examples of ancient sites that line up with Hapgood's pole location. This Adam's calendar over in Africa, 75,000 years ago, so it was there from the very beginning. I'll let this go through here and show you these pole locations that line up to these ancient sites with these huge rocks that can't be moved with an ice age or a flood or any kind of natural disaster. The Creator wanted us to know that these events had happened, and that's why they're made out of such large stones. These temples they line up, they used to line up with north, south, east, and west. You just have to be able to figure out where east used to be, and then it all starts to make sense. They're all over the world, and there's no magical energy field. There's no generators. These are piles of stone, and they were connected by lines of sight, and the Creator used them to help balance the planet. He had his guardians at each one, and they communicated, and if they needed more weight, they built a bigger pyramid. That's why you have pyramids built at different periods of time, and step pyramids that are built on top of each other. And maybe we should be thinking about building pyramids right now. Maybe we should be worrying about the Earth's speed. The base of the pyramid gives us the speed of the Earth. The distance to the box inside the king's chamber gives us the distance to the sun and the moon, and the weight of the sun and the moon and the Earth. It's all about time and balance, our location in space. And this figure here is from Israel, and you notice that the stone is the same as the one at this. And you notice that the stone that represents the equinox is also the stone used at Gobekli Tepe, where they've just uncovered all these stone circles, and I think each one of them represents a different period of time. And that one stone you see that marks the equinox, well, it's there in Israel. It's here at Gobekli Tepe. And then you see the marks on top of those stones were actually used to balance the earth. All these magnificent temples over in Mexico, it's the same thing. You need more than one point of reference to balance a round ball floating in space. It's the same principle as when you're building a fence. You need 2 points of reference. Where you want to make a straight line, you put one post at one end, one post at the other, and you have somebody move a post back and forth in between the two. So you need 3 points of reference. Well, to balance a circle, you needed more than that. You needed about 6 or 8, 12 points of references. And I believe that's why Stonehenge is the way it is. The Mayan temples are the way they are. All of these ancient sites were very worried about where the equinox was, winter, summer solstices, and then they had different points of references where you could look. One person standing in the middle there at the day of the equinox, he could tell if the earth was in balance or not, and if it needed more weight in one place than the other. It's not how big an object is, it's how much it's out of balance. It's just like a truck tire. When you put a weight on a truck tire, it might weigh a quarter ounce. It doesn't matter what the weight of the tire is, it's how much it's out of balance. The Creator used a prayer feather, a feather to show that amount of weight. It's in all the murals. All the Native Americans always have prayer feathers. That's how it's such a trivial amount that you don't think it would amount to anything, but it does. And so I'll go through these sites here and show you that they're all the same. And if you just use that little wheel, the Hopi Truth Wheel, I call it, with north, south, east, and west, you can figure out where east used to be and what period of time those were built and why there's so many of them. So I'll go through this here and let you look at them. There's many more. I just grabbed a few to down here in Chile. Now you can understand why that's there, why they use this as an observatory. Here's up at St. Louis. This is the pyramid complex up there. Lines up perfect with the wheel. And then you have Chaco Canyon, which resembles a bow. It's lined up with the equinox. They have the moon cycles there, which takes 9 years in each direction to do. So you know people live there at least 18 years, but there's no burial grounds. I think this is where the guardians lived, and there's a kiva there that looks just like a rattle, and Hopis will tell you the top end of the rattle is always for north and the bottom is always for south in the Earth's rotation. And if Chaco Canyon is Sirius, then the Dog Star should be located around there, and there's the constellation of it, and you see where Zuni is the rear leg of the dog, and those little red dots are all ancient sites. So a friend of mine, when I gave him some information, he helped me with those figures there. His name's Gary Vay, and he came up with it if the distance to the North Pole from the equator is 6,215 feet, and that's where all these sites are. That's where the equator used to be. Well, if you go to one of Hapgood's pole locations, well, then there's a whole nother set of them that were built there on the equator when the pole was at a different time. So it all starts coming together, why these ancient sites are where they at and why they use such big stones. And he plotted all those things for me on Google Earth. So here's some more stone circles that are around the Earth that are all doing the same thing. They're trying to tell us where east used to be. And the solstice. There's a church carved in stone on the four bases, first, second, third, and fourth worlds. So I think the Hopi creation story is a clue for us is what's really going on. And then there's one more mural I wanted you to take a look at. This is the one that shows the creator not creating. He's standing up here on that first row and he's looking at the earth upside down 8 times. He said he'd only do 7. Then he's got the next little line there in the middle. Kind of read this like you read Hopi pottery. He shows the creator up on top, 7 times up on top of a circle. And I'll show you the next mural. Those circles represent the 25,920. Then the next level, you show that there's 8, and he's already bent over backwards to balance the planet 4 times. He won't do 8. There's a man tipping over with a snake in his mouth, and then there's a 2-sided figure, and then a man rolling over. And then the snake represents your path. Well, that's the end of the path. He's not going to create. Then you have the beetle, and the beetle's rolling over. Then there's the creator and his nephew and the spider woman getting blessed for the next world to come. So here he is, the creator up on top, the 2 paths, 6 and 6, the constellations, and that's about where we're traveling through space. Now this is a real Kachina doll shows the 3 prayer feathers. When the Kachinas sing, the feathers send the message to the creator, and this is represented over in the pyramids of Egypt. And this is the cover of my book. All right, thanks. There's a few more things I'd like to say real quick here. Is that this is my theory, not that of the Hopis. The Hopis are all about the ant hills. This is my theory, so if it's wrong, it's on me. But a lot of the Hopis think they came up out of the Grand Canyon, and I believe they're probably true. it's a different clan, and if every star in the constellation of Orion represents a village here on the ground, then the star that's over the Grand Canyon, I imagine that's the location of where they came from. So it'd be just north of the confluence of the Little Colorado and the Big Colorado, right where they've always said they've came from. So that's my theory. But the beetle, and a few people have asked me about the beetle, why it's on the murals of Egypt, and I believe it's because the beetle does just what the Creator did. He laid his eggs here on this planet after putting it in a perfect circle, and now we're evolving just like the beetle's eggs evolved. You can see in this mural that the two twins are holding the beetle down so it won't fly away. So, well, thanks for listening.